Now, the other animal that came there was something that our hostess here gave you, goat. That was a little troublesome.
Little Bartleby.
Little Bartleby, does that one stand out in your mind as well?
Well, he's such a character because he's a little guy, he's a Napoleon, little guy with a big personality, has to prove himself to the world. And we had him as an underfooter. Rambo was the first underfooter, the animals who were allowed to free range.
Oh, that's what underfooter means?
The underfoot family, because they
let them go wherever they want, and they don't leave the property.
No. But we tried Bartleby, lots, for whatever reason, age, personality, history, some combination of those things, don't thrive in a flock or in a herd. So if your job is to do what's necessary in order that each individual can thrive, then sometimes that means you have to accommodate the individual.
Right.
So we have this varying cast of characters who are called the Underfoots, and Bartleby was one. Until he poked a little 2-year-old girl in the side with his horn, and it was totally unprovoked. He was fast. He wouldn't, some goats you'll know when they're coming at you, he would just go like that. And so poor little Bartleby lost his underfoot privileges. But he's out among one of our goat.
Let me ask you this, because I think this is important for anybody understanding the whole concept of Catskill Animal Sanctuary. Where did you gain all your expertise, or did you work with veterinarians to realize and guidance in how to treat the different animals? Because you have a variety, and all of them have special care, of some difference.
The best piece of advice we got some good advice from established sanctuaries. The best piece of advice we got was stay small. For the first couple years. And as you know, we stayed tiny. We had, for the first 2 years, 20-some animals, and half of them were rabbits. So, and the other half were Rambo and all his crew.
And the sheep,
So the sheep and the goats. So that allowed us to learn and focus on particular species. We read, we consulted people like Holly Cheever,
Dr. Bartoff,
and Dr. Bartoff. We consulted lots of vets. We were reading and researching constantly, going to workshops, learning from the established sanctuaries. I had some rudimentary knowledge of horses. No, I had more than that. I knew horses because I had grown up with them. But other than that, some mistakes are inevitable, but you don't want the mistakes to come at the animal's expense. And so the best thing we did was to listen to that advice and stay very small and learn as we went. And part of that meant learning that very often we were going to disagree with the vets. A lot of vets still use rubber bands to neuter goats.
I know Dr. Bartoff thought that Rambo would never be turned around. He was afraid that he would hurt somebody, and even after he was neutered, I know Dr. Bartoff felt he was a dangerous animal.
Pretty adamant that we should
euthanize him. He would be hurt, but you managed to turn that around through recognizing his psychology, the Rambo's psychology, and what needed to be done. So sometimes you have to push back a little against the vets, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. You pretty often do. And we recently had a case where the vet, a horse was struggling and struggling and struggling and struggling, and
struggling to do what? Stand up?
Get healthy. Just get healthy.
Okay. All right.
One day it was his eyes, the next day it was his respiratory system, the next day he had a hoof abscess, the next day he had another hoof abscess, the next, it was just, one day he had this skin fungus. It was like his body was falling apart before our eyes. And the vet kept saying, well, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. And after several months of trying this and even calling in an alternative vet for acupuncture, for laser treatments, it wasn't working. And the vet wasn't ready to put this animal down, but we were torturing him. And so you just, you've got to make you've got to be so crystal clear that it is always about the animal and his or her quality of life and nothing else. It doesn't matter if I'm ready to let somebody go or not. It's not about me. It's not about the vet. It's not.
Yeah, I would say that's what Samantha Mullen always advocated. You have to do what's best for the animal. That's the guiding principle in anything to do with animals. Let me ask you this. As far as the animals that come into the sanctuary, are they mainly, because I know you help out with various cases, but do you get them from auctions where somebody's trying to save a cow or a horse from going to auction, or are they mainly from hoarder cases? How do most of the animals arrive at your sanctuary?
Okay, I love this question because the answers are never what people think. A lot of them do come from hoarders. A lot of them do come from industry. So, for example, when a crate of ducks fell off a truck coming out of Hudson Valley foie gras, and the state police picked them up and brought them to Catskill Animal Sanctuary. So a lot come from industry, and a whole lot come from animal hoarders. A few come from people who have gotten too old to care for their beloved animals or too sick. But a lot come from what we call random acts of callousness. A rabbit tied to a tree in Central Park, chicken stuffed in a mailbox, ducks in a dumpster. Just lots come from weird situations.
And good citizens picking, good Samaritans, picking them up and calling you and saying, can I bring this? Sometimes you have
or not calling, or just showing up.
With them. All right. Do you turn them away when they come if you're full? Or do you refer them to someone? Or do you try and make room sometimes? Depends on the animal, probably.
You know, you try. We all try to do the greatest good for the greatest number. When somebody comes down the driveway desperate, and you sense that if you don't take those animals, they're going to wind up in the woods.
That's very important,
Then you have to make room for the animals.
Because
that's a bad, because we hate being put in that position.
I know.
But it happens.
But you do recognize, thankfully, that desperate people will do desperate things. And what is primary is the welfare, the well-being of the animal. And somehow you have to help it.
Somehow you have to help it, even if the result means, for example, that those rabbits that somebody just showed up with have to live in the office because we don't have any room.
Well, it's better than where they were.
Now,
let me ask you this. It seems to me that one of the primary causes of the suffering farm animals is the eating of meat by the general populace. Do you feel that the work you're doing at the sanctuary, I know you're advocating vegan eating habits or vegetarian, do you have classes? What do you do to try and reduce the number, just kind of get people to eat a little less?
Thank you for asking that. That is the second half of our mission. You could open up 100 sanctuaries tomorrow and not make a dent in the suffering of billions of farm animals. Good people who adore their cats and their dogs and would never intentionally hurt an animal are, through their habits, through our choice to eat meat, are forcing billions every year to experience torture from birth to death. And so the challenge for Catskill Animal Sanctuary is to appeal to the inherent goodness in people, right? Because people come to Catskill Animal Sanctuary. Jerks don't come to Catskill Animal Sanctuary. People know we're not a zoo. People know it's not a petting zoo. So for the most part, people who are still eating animals come with the knowledge that on a certain level they're going to be made to feel a little bit uncomfortable. So we lead with love. We recognize that it took all of us some years to get there. And then we try to make it both urgent and fun. We have a camp for kids. We have tours where people spend half the time getting kissed by cows and lying on the ground and kissing pigs. We have lots of vegan cooking classes all season long. We have a blog that it gives people tips on how to. And then in my talks, what I've started to do now is not only talk about the suffering of the animals, but our diet is the #1 cause of global warming,
Right.
so it becomes more urgent by
Can
the
you
day.
speak to that for a moment? Because I think a lot of people don't know that.
Sure. It takes I mean, I could talk for an hour about this, but the simplest way to understand it, I would recommend that everybody watch a movie, a brilliant documentary called Cowspiracy. But in the meantime, I'm going to borrow Linda's apple. There's a wonderful little activity called the Earth as an Apple, and what I love about it is that a 6-year-old can understand it. You carve up, this thing represents the Earth. You carve it into quarters. You put 3/4 aside, because 3/4 of the Earth is water. Everybody knows that. We're taught that in 2nd grade or whatever. 3/4 is water. So you have 1/4 of the Earth on which all of us have to live. All humans and all animals, and all the food that's grown to feed all of us. The human population, 7 billion now, 10 billion by 2050. This planet isn't getting any bigger. It takes 15 to 20 times the amount of resources to feed a person on a meat and dairy based diet as it does to feed a vegan. You take this 1/4, part of it's already used, part of it's too hot, part of it's too dry, part of it's too wet, too icy, part of it's already taken up by housing and infrastructure. You're left with 3% of this entire planet that's capable of growing food. So isn't it incumbent on all of us to use this precious limited resource in the wisest way, in the way that has the smallest footprint, and there's no 15 to 20 times more land, more water, more energy
Used for meat.
And dairy than for a plant-based diet.
Let me ask you a question. I know that you've bought some additional property, and that's up and running at this point. And was that with the idea that you were just getting too crowded and you needed to expand to another farm?
Pat, these are such good questions. We bought it for 4 reasons. One is that global warming is real, and our property, while it's lovely, is in a valley, and we saw through Sandy and Irene and Lee that we could potentially be in trouble if something worse than that happens. So we looked for nearby higher ground. So that was the selfish reason. Another selfish reason, not selfish, that's the wrong word. Another reason is that we wanted, you know, there are lots of people, our tours grow every year. Some of the animals, it's their favorite day of the week. Like, oh, people, right? Some of them don't want to be bothered, frankly. So having a nearby close property enables us to give the animals who want that attention, the attention, and to keep a true sanctuary for the ones who don't. And then we needed space for our programming. We're building a big Institute for Compassionate Living and dorms so that we can expand our camp, have an adult camp kindness, which people are asking for, develop a mentor program, develop a program for struggling sanctuaries. So all of that will operate.
Now we're all talking money here, big money. Do you have, I mean, you have a plan to support your expansion efforts, right?
We're developing it now. It's going to be challenging, but every year brings a new challenge.
And people now, you're probably as well known at this point, possibly as the Farm Sanctuary in Ithaca, right? In the Ithaca area.
I don't know. They still feel like the mother of all sanctuaries.
Well, I think they are. You know, they are kind of the model for everything. But your awareness of your organization, I think, is very large, you know, across the country.
I hope so. I hope so. There are good people out there, and they're becoming more interested in this work that we're all doing.
Okay. To wind up here, would you like to say a final thought about welcoming people and when they should come to the
Sure,
sanctuary?
sure. We are open for tours on Saturdays and Sundays. First tour starts at 11, and we would love to see you there.
And it starts, what, in May?
No, we're starting.
Oh,
It's
started. So
started
it
now.
goes from April to...
Through the end of October.
Through the end of October. Okay. Well, thank you very much
Thank
for
you so
coming
much.
here
This is
today.
great.
It's been great talking to you, and I think people learned a lot. Remember to subscribe to our video series, Conversations with Mocha, by clicking the subscribe button below, and you request to receive notifications for each new video by clicking the button next to the subscribe button. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you very much,
Thanks,
Kathy,
Kat.
for taking
Thanks,
time out
everybody.
of your busy day.